friends in the great debaters of Morocco that I respect so much. I've been collaborating with them for so many years, and the Great Debaters Morocco is a very, very serious and enthusiastic youth organization which is contributing to empowering young leaders to participate effectively in decision-making process. And I'm really thrilled that they have been able to bring you all here today to discuss one of the most important issues related to energy security, climate change, environment, and water. And my intervention will focus more on how water diplomacy could contribute to boost regional cooperation on water. And also, I will walk you through the process, and I'm sure you will have a lot of discussions, debates, and panels and workshops. And I want you, through this introductory notes, to reflect throughout the week about your role in this whole process. As you know, that water is key to survival. There is a global consensus that this is a prerequisite for survival for all species, yet water is perceived differently from a culture to another. I have the privilege to work not only in Morocco, but I worked in Jordan for 3 months, and I think water is one of the top priority issues in water, given all the stressing factors in the region about water scarcity. I worked in Tunisia, and I worked with colleagues in Algeria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and in Africa. And I think there are a lot of interesting best practices and lessons learned that you can learn from one another, given that issue is very important. And I know also that water issue is a complex by nature. Why? Because it has 3 important dimensions. The first one is natural, and it deals with water quality and quantity, and also with the ecosystem. And this requires a lot of expertise, scientific expertise, a lot of studies and think tanks to determine the future of water quality. And also it has a societal dimension. And I'm gonna speak a little bit about some of the recent reports about the United Nations that talks about the importance of water in relations to stability and peace and security. And also it has economic and social economic dimensions and social values. And one of the most important thing is the political dimension. And this political dimension is related to the whole process of the cycle of policy at the global level and the negotiations. And I'm not going to talk more specifically about the practical side, because I have here with me a very, very good friend and activist who have been engaged at the practical level in different climate change conferences with the UN. She will give you a very, very practical side about how youth and civil society are involved in a whole cycle of decision-making process. So I'm really happy that Fadwa is here with us today. And also, I wanted to note that water scarcity is becoming a global crisis. You know, I don't know if you've been following COP23 and also the recent one in Paris. They have raised water in high level in the agenda. In Morocco, just more recently, the king has given instructions to the government to elevate water in the agenda, political agenda of the government. So we're faced by a real serious problem related to water, and water resource management has become a real problem. And so the objective of this panel, this first part, is to highlight the crucial role water diplomacy in water, how the role of water diplomacy in achieving a global sustainable safety and security. And I want also that you reflect on what role could you play as engaged citizens in your respective countries, but also as global citizens, that you are interacting with other global issues that not only impact your countries, but also impact the region and also the world. So how water diplomacy could contribute to create adaptive and actionable knowledge to resolve water problems through negotiated solutions. You know, in diplomacy, it's a bit a complex process because it involves a lot of politics, it involves a lot of lobbying, a lot of advocacy. There are decision makers, there are influencers, there are lobbyist groups, there are interest groups who some of them would actually advance collaboration and cooperation. Some of them may block your this collaboration and cooperation because it damages their interest. So the importance here is to understand this whole cycle of how negotiations are made at the global level, how decisions are made at the global level, and how they are translated into your own respective countries. I'm sure in all climate change conferences and other high-level UN conferences where we have countries that sign conventions, it's sometimes important to understand what is the effect and impact of these conventions signed by your countries at your national level, and to what extent these countries that have signed these treaties or conventions are translating this into the local solutions, how they are implementing it in the ground, and how they are aligning this with local legislation and with local politics. Because when we talk about the whole process, I'm sure you would ask one of the key questions is, how does it affect me as a citizen? Because sometimes, especially when we talk about, bigger conventions or bigger conferences, we talk a lot of jargon. Especially when we talk about environment, it's too much technical, it's too much jargon. Not everyone would understand from the scientific and technical point of view of all aspects related to climate change and environment. The normal citizen, apart from civil society and other stakeholders that are engaged in the process, would not understand these terminology. What his or her concern is, how does it affect his or her daily life? When it threatens their survival, when it threatens their purchasing power, this is what they want to know. And one of the biggest issues here is that often we have communication problems and how we translate all these global engagement in all those issues that concerns us into that normal citizen, and how we as organizations or civil society or youth would contribute to raising awareness at the very community-based level of these citizens, to engage them in contributing to water resource management and the rational use of water that would contribute effectively to the bigger picture. So this is one of the challenges of diplomacy. So the prerequisites for me are four. As I mentioned, communication through water dialogue across border. So understanding each other's opinion, perceptions, and presumptions about water. I'm sure in Jordan, they have different perception about water and level of water scarcity and engagement in the region because of the specificity of the region. In Morocco, it should be different because, of course, we have also the geostrategic and political dimension because we have trans-border issues according to our geographical location that would identify and determine the importance and level of collaboration and cooperation on water. So dialogue is very important. The second prerequisite is co-creation through transdisciplinary water think tank. You cannot effectively participate in diplomacy and through, I'm sure you will have debates and you will prepare research and do argumentation to prepare for negotiation, etc. You need that technical expertise and research in order to build on your argument. And this is something important, that tools need to be identified to create the knowledge. It's knowledge management. How these countries would create sharing systems to share knowledge about water scarcity, and more importantly, is to identify the best practices and lessons learned, because there are some countries who have moved and advanced in concrete cooperation and would constitute a real case study that some countries would benefit from. A collaboration through multi-scale water governance, and different countries have different governance system. So how to align and combine and have synergy in governance in multidisciplinary collaboration committee between different countries, and inclusive participation. Now, today in the whole world, not just in your countries, there is a growing need of inclusive participation of all stakeholders. And many have created a lot of consultative bodies and platforms, apart from those who are well known from the United Nations. In different countries, they, at their constitution and organic laws, they created a lot of different mechanisms for consultation that would allow you as citizens and civil society to be a force of proposition, submitting your own proposals and input and voice your opinion to influence the decision-making process. And this is something important that you should take into account, because not only you should contribute to write policy briefs at the international level, but you have to contribute in your respective countries and voice your opinion and play your watchdog function to see how these international conventions in all climate change conferences would impact you as citizens. Also, I think there is a growing consensus on the imperative of trans-border cooperation between countries, more specifically those countries that share river, lakes, and other fresh resources. Yet, the problem is how to define this trans-border water cooperation. And I refer here to this consensus has been referenced in SDG 6.5.2 and also a UN Secretary General deliberation, and I'm going to come out to that in a minute. So how to define transborder water cooperation and how to measure it for the benefit of those who want to advance it, because in this diplomacy cycle you will find people who have interest to advance this collaboration and people who would block it. So you need to have your analysis of the whole policy cycle and understand what level you could intervene in this policy cycle by having a power dynamic and stakeholder analysis to see who's doing what and what could you contribute to influence positively this decision. So you need to understand the water diplomacy framework and how we have a complementary between official diplomacy and citizen diplomacy. And also from issue identification into the participation, mobilization, evaluation, and also alternative dispute resolution, because this water issues needs a lot of mediation and water dispute resolution. I would like to refer you to one of the important reports. I think it's a recent report that I advise you to read. It's 2017, it's a very recent one, Water Quotient, and it is a barometer to measure water cooperation and also to measure to what level these water issues could create wars and problems. Also, I would like to just give a brief example of some cooperation blocks, like for example the European Union Water Framework Directive. There is also Association of South Asia Nation Working Group on Water. So countries who share issues of water create collaboration blocks as a policy think tanks, but at the same time it needs a political will and a political decision so that they can advance and solve problems. There's also one in Africa and others. Now the challenges, yes?
Ah, sorry.
What?
It was the 2017 Water
2017 water quotient. It is a very recent report, and it is done by a strategic think tank group that works closely with the United Nations, and it worked on a recent report that was discussed at the Security Council of the UN. So the complex challenge is when you have countries that share lakes or river in multiple countries, which makes collaboration more complex, and it needs a lot of diplomacy to avoid wars. And I just brought this here. They say any two countries engaged in active water cooperation do not go to war for any reason. So if these countries invest more in diplomacy, in collaboration, enhance more communication and dialogue, we will be avoiding war. Now I'll be closing my remarks with the importance of water in the United Nations, and you can read the recent reports of the UN Security Council and other high-level panel on water of 2017, so you can understand the dimension of the importance of water. So I would like to stress that in the past 25 years, each successive UN Secretary General has called for greater emphasis on water in relation to peace. You know, I think we have some of the important UN resolutions in the past 20 years, the one on women and peace and security, 2 years ago it was the historic one on youth, peace and security, and there is one in 2012 on water and peace and security. So the UN Security Council I think changed a little bit the dimension of the discourse related to water, moving it from just a human rights based development issue to an issue that is related to peace, security and stability. And this is something that we have to take into consideration. And also I'm going to refer you to the UN Economic Commission for Europe and UNESCO that are recently mandated just in 2017 to prepare development indicators in compliance with SDG 5.2. So you see that water has become really crucial, and that diplomacy has become more important. I'm gonna leave it to the discussions, because I want you to reflect really on how you as active citizens of your countries would be engaged in this process. How do you value your contribution that could be meaningful in the whole process of water negotiations? Thank you so much.
My question will goes to Karima Rhanem. You talk about the country's consensus on the water diplomacy, but my question will be, don't you think that these resources will be a conflict zone in the future, like between the countries? However, these resources will be a conflict zone in the future, from the political aspects, of course. Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned the fact that youth play an extremely important role in promoting sustainable development and water policy diplomacy process. So I think that youth involvement, and you talk about youth involvement and inclusive communities. So sometimes civic engagement is restricted in some countries. So, and these restrictions can create a kind of gap and unrest between governments and civil society organizations. So, what can we do to solve these issues?
Good morning, everyone. My name is C.C-Ms.Karima from Morocco. I'm an epidemiologist. My question is to Ms Karima, and can we say that Morocco has a very successful experience in water priorities?
In water?
Morocco.
Policy. In water?
And
water policies.
Policies, yes.
We can say that Morocco has a very successful experience in Moroccan policies in the African continent. And we can say also in the old world, because he has many days and many strategies. Every year we have many strategies of water conservation and water management.
Hello, my name is Sarah Zayad and I'm from Lebanon. I'm studying environmental health. In Lebanon, for example, we have a lot of issues like solid waste crisis, refugee crisis. So basically, they wouldn't really care about the environmental issues like climate change. So how can we convince them that it's really important to tackle these issues in the presence of many other problems?
Let me start with the one on the consensus. Actually, why we advocate for having this collaboration and cooperation and consensus is because these resources are already a problem. It's not that there will be a problem in the future. They're already constituting now a global crisis. You know, if you just see the recent High Panel on Water on the UN, they just declared that the world is going on a global water crisis. So it's not something that, as Fed was said before, they were forced to do it because there is no choice. I mean, we have the impact of global warming, climate change. So there is a necessity to work on that, because also when it comes to peace and security, there have been recent reports just in 2017 that these issues and conflicts related to water problems are contributing directly to creating not just internal conflicts but wars as well, and that water in installations has also been documented that there has been a target in wars. So this is a real serious problem that would require, first of all, the political will of these countries to work together, given the fact that, of course, they have different interests. I'm not going to talk from a perception point of view, but geopolitical and strategic interest, and also going back to the pure economic interest. And as Fed was said, if you have the chance to participate in any COP climate change conferences, these guys are talking industry. And they're the ones who are polluting, and we're paying for that. So it's about money, it's about industry, it's about interest, it's not about an environment. And I will come back to that would lead me to the other question about the environment. How can we make people care about the environment, where the whole international scene is becoming so hot with so many problems and priorities, terrorism and other conflicts in the region, that you would sometimes go back to, for example, Maslow pyramid, and you would say, what about the environment? It's not my priority. But note that environment now is becoming the third generation of human rights. And this is really important. If I go back to Morocco, for example, even before, there has been the first initiative of having an environment policy in Morocco. And I think through the organization of COP22, I think there has been an important awareness raising among citizens and civil society during the whole year of the preparation of COP22 and post COP22, to raise their awareness about the importance of interacting and reacting and having initiatives on environment issues. And I can tell you, for example, from my perspective, I work as a policy advocacy specialist. And after COP22, we have received a lot of civil society projects focusing more on the environment, which is really important in the phase of raising awareness and also empowering these civil society to take prepare alternative, because this is the most important thing. And I'll come back to one of the questions. I think I have already noted it before. You asked the question about how to have inclusive policies and engage youth in the process. Given the fact that I worked across the region, more specifically on youth policies, And of course, legislation differs from country to another. There are some countries who are more advanced in their constitutions, for example, Morocco, Tunisia, and in their organic laws, which translated these participatory democracy mechanisms that allow civil society organizations and citizens alike to present petitions, motions, legislative motions, participate with alternatives to influence the decision-making process. Of course, I would say, if you are not having a chance to participate in influencing the decision, you need to have an advocacy strategy to advocate, to voice your opinion, and be on the table. You have to advocate for your seat in the table to change the legislation. And I think there are a lot of experiences across the region that you can learn from. And the most important thing is how to empower these young people to own their local solutions by themselves for sustainable actions. Because what is problematic is that we depend too much on foreign experiences, but we don't own our own solutions. So empowerment is important in the whole process, because that's what was said when we talk about advocacy. Advocacy is not the end result that you achieve, because it all depends on the political will of the decision maker. The most important thing is the process that you choose, and your advocacy strategy to include those who don't have a voice in the whole process. You're not speaking for them, you're including them in the whole process, making them concerned to voice their opinion, so that they can have sustainable advocacy. If you can remind me of other. For the Morocco experience, I think even as I said in the beginning, that just more recently there have been a lot of resources that have been deployed, especially that Morocco has been engaged as a country in the climate change at the global level since COP22, COP23, and the recent one. And Morocco is playing champion for several sub-themes related to climate change, and more recently, as I said in the beginning, the King has instructed the government to elevate this into the political agenda, which I think in the coming few weeks, reports will be delivered, so that they can have an integrated strategy to implement it as to water resources management. Because when we talk about water, there are a lot of cross-sectoral themes and other issues that cross-cut the water. So it's not about just one sector that we should focus on. How we would have an integrated strategy that combine all the line ministries in order to implement that. So if I forgot something, then
Mine.
What was yours?
Okay, how a global citizen can act as a global citizen and not as a local citizen following, his local cultural environment.
I think it's complementary. It's a bit difficult question to answer because we, like, for example, we are advocates for our national causes and issues at the local and national level, but we are interacting with a lot of other issues. Climate change, conflicts in the world, etc. Because now we're talking about globalization of issues that are impacting us. So we cannot, we cannot not to act. For example, if something is happening in Lebanon, in Palestine, or in Algeria, I cannot, as an active citizen, not engage or be in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in other countries, because what happens to them could happen to me as a citizen, because we're not thinking about, this is happening to others. It's only there. Sometimes we have that thinking that we are far away from conflict zones, that we tend to be neutral and that, well, maybe it doesn't concern us. No, it concerns us because it doesn't happen to others. What happens to others could happen to me. So me as a global citizen, I have to find a balance between what I'm advocating for my country, but at the same time, not staying indifferent of what is happening in the world in other countries.
And I think